Hi, I've invited you into my shop because I'm about to make a couple of floater frames and I want to show you how I do it. I start with rails that I make from poplar and pine, and I've got two kinds of rails. One is like this, it's 4.5-inch deep canvases. I make it from poplar right here and pine with this piece of wood. I'll show you how I make these in another video, but I just wanted to show you the finishing part of the process here. The other kind of frame that I make is for panels, and it has this kind of a configuration. The poplar is here, the pine is here, and I use another piece here to raise the panel up off of the base of the thing, and so that it has a deep kind of a channel here that you can see from the gap in the float there. So I'm about to chop these up into pieces, and I'll show you how I do. I'm going to start with the smaller panel floater. First thing I'm going to do is cut the 11-inch sections. And voila. So next I'm going to do the 12 by 24 inch deep panel. I'm going to start by cutting the 12-inch sections. The easiest way is to measure from the already cut section. So I line them up with my square, I make a mark, just always making sure to check and see if they're lined up properly, and with my square I make a mark on the new piece. Checking to make sure I've got the right mark. I've got the 12-inch sections just about right there. Next come the 24-inch sections. Sure enough, they match pretty well there. Next part is I'm going to glue them together, and for that I use these belt clamps, which are very handy for gluing sections together. Take this part apart, make sure I have enough length here, and I'm going to start by gluing the corner pieces of my panel floater. Apply the glue to the that's my lovely wife coming home from physical therapy. Okay. Hi, dear. So now I'm arranging the pieces. So what I've just done is I've set these frames up for the glue set in these belt clamps. The big one here, which will accommodate a painting that is not quite 1.5 inches deep. So I'm going to have to trim this depth down on the table saw so that the sides of the frame will only stick out about 1/4 inch from the surface of the painting. That'll be no problem for the panel because this is designed already to accommodate that depth. But they'll be dry in 2-3 hours, and then I'm going to do the other part of the process. This frame is made from rails that were designed for a 1.5-inch deep canvas, but the picture that I'm framing is on a cradled panel, which is 3/4 inch deep. So I'm going to have to cut the depth of this down to whatever it is that'll fit that depth, with about 1/4 inch left to spare there. First, we use the rough sandpaper. Stick it right on there. Velcro's on. And let's start with the deeper floater. This is how I make the rounded corners. I round the edges and the corners. So for this part, I have to use a mask. This is where I spray the frame with a coat of matte varnish. I do this partly outside so that I get adequate ventilation, and I wear a mask. Tray. The next step in finishing the frame is installing the painting, and I'm going to show you how I go about doing that. I start by placing the painting inside the frame, and as you can see, I measured very carefully that it would fit, and just by hand I make sure that the gaps between the edge of the painting and the frame are even. So that's the first step. I really just do this by feel. And then I clamp the painting to the frame using these bits of wood. It helps to prevent damage by the clamps to the painting. And I'll clamp it like this. I love these little clamps. They're very convenient and fun to use. Just squeeze them together. Like that. So once I do that, then I can place the painting, try doing it like that. Put this just to weigh it down. And then I screw the painting to the frame using these little 1-inch drywall screws. You have to make sure that the screws are not so long that they'll come through on the other side. Screws are in, clamps come off. And voila. And the thing I've learned about putting the hanger on the back is that it helps to put the hanger pretty close to the top of the picture. You also have to make sure that the top of the picture is the top of the picture. So before I do that, I'll check, and yes indeed, that end is the top. And now I'll install my first D-ring. And I check just briefly to see what distance that is from the top so that I can make sure it's about the same there. You can use anything to measure that. So there it is. Okay, once I've got the D-rings in place, I pull out a piece of wire little bit longer than I need for the actual length of the hanger. Clip it here, needle nose pliers, put it in there, make sure that's even and taut. And then I sort of work it around like that, sort of like a square knot, and pull it tight with my needle nose. Same on both sides. And then wind this around several times so that I've got about 3/4 to an inch of wind around there, just so that it's not going to go anywhere and that it looks neat. And I trim the excess with my needle nose. Same thing on both sides. Voila! You have a picture ready to hang. This is a painting of the Flat Rock Playhouse that's going to go to the gallery at Flat Rock. My method for installing the painting on the panel floater is different because there isn't enough depth in the panel to use screws. So I use adhesive tape, and I'm going to show you how I do that. So for the first step in this process, I use a kind of rubber cement adhesive to just go over the inside rail, you know, this thing that supports the panel inside the floater frame. So I'll show you how I do that, and then I put the double stick tape on top of that. So for the first part of this process, as I say, I use this sort of rubber cement type material. Very cheap brushes. I get these for like, you know, a few dollars for like a whole pack of them at the art supply store. You can use those foam brushes from Home Depot as well. I always use cheap brushes for whatever I do. Most of them are pretty adequate. And when you're painting or, you know, using a substance like this, there's really no chance of ever being able to clean the brush effectively enough that you could reuse it again. So that's the first step. The second part of this process involves meeting out some of this double stick tape. So I do this on my cutting mat. Just make sure that I have enough for both lengths, most of both lengths. You don't have to go the whole way. Cut that there. And this will be enough for both sides. I do that on the short side as well. I cut this in half, slice it lengthwise. Then I'll be ready to put it on the support rails. I have to let the adhesive dry just a little bit before I do this, but it'll be okay. So I'm putting the double stick tape on the short sides here, and this on the long sides. I cut them a little bit short because I don't want the corners to overlap. All this stuff at Home Depot, the adhesive as well as the tape. Ready to peel the final layer of protective film. Now we're ready to install the painting. And I have to do this part very carefully because I don't have the opportunity of readjusting the gap. So I have to estimate it first and then just drop it in there as evenly as I possibly can. Press it down into on the double stick tape, and voila. This lovely painting is by my friend Peggy Cotton in Berkeley, California.